Hello, my name's Paul Armitage. I'm a composer, musician from Vancouver. My friend Rita invited me to come and talk a bit about my work, and that's why I'm here. I use the word channeling, although I think channeling is often implies a certain kind of esoteric or specialness, but I think it's actually quite similar to what a lot of jazz musicians or very creative people that are able to trust their natural spontaneity in the moment. Because the music I do often has a very specific intention for healing, and it comes from a desire to assist people in having a deeper experience of their essence, perhaps on a spiritual level. I found the word channeling sometimes was maybe a bit more accurate in describing or conveying that aspect of the process by which I allow the music to come through me. In my background, I began my musical studies when I was quite young. I was 6 years old, and I had figured out how to play God Save the Queen by ear, plunking away on the piano. And my mother invited her next door neighbor over for tea one day who was a piano teacher. So that's how my musical education began. I wasn't a very disciplined student. The first few years I wanted to quit a number of times, but my mother persuaded me to stick it out, which I'm grateful for. I did about 10 years of sort of the traditional classical repertoire training in the Royal Conservatory. So I had a fairly good grounding in knowing how to read music and some music theory and some technique. But like I say, I wasn't really that disciplined as a classical player. In my teens, I kind of rebelled against the strict rules of all that, though, because I just wanted to be more free and spontaneous. And I was, like a lot of teenagers, I was very inspired by pop music, and my biggest inspiration then was Elton John, who was a big star in the mid-1970s. And so I kind of quit the lessons, and I started learning all the pop music with Elton John and other artists. And that was where the door opened for me to begin to learn to improvise. And it kind of gradually evolved over the next few years. And it was maybe when I was around 20 years old, I would go out to the University of British Columbia. They had a residence there for the students. There was a beautiful grand piano in one of the dorms. And the room was almost always open. So once a week I'd drive out there and go sit at the grand piano for an hour. And a couple of times I had this very interesting experience where I was in the middle of playing. I might have been playing 10 or 15 minutes. I was very caught up in the music. There was no one else in the room at the beginning. But in the middle of this 20-minute improvisation, I would hear a noise, and I'd turn and realize that one of the students had walked in and sat down, and they were listening to me playing. In the moment I became conscious that there was a person actually paying attention to the music I was improvising, I noticed this dramatic surge of energy running through my body, a feeling of great inspiration. It just seemed to amplify that, which really struck me as very unusual. It was a few years later I was reading a number of spiritual books talking about how artists and creative people, when they find a way to tap into their creative inspiration as they're expressing their art, that this is a direct link to having a conscious, tangible experience of connecting to the divine source, our own source. It was around the year 2000, and the opportunity opened up for me to go down to Mt Shasta, and I had made a connection with Dr. Norma Milanovic, who was one of the regular keynote presenters, had spoken at this big event for 3 years. And Norma and I had made a connection, and my schedule changed, so I was available. And so I called her a week before and offered to volunteer just to play some music, perhaps during a meditation. And she was very enthusiastically, yeah, that would be great. So I drove down to Mt Shasta. It was a Sunday morning of a 3-day event, and Norma had a 45-minute talk, and there was about 2,000 people there in the room, and it was only about 10 minutes long. It was right at the end of the talk that she gave. But Norma, she really had the entire audience was just totally present. They were just so engaged in her talk. And just before I played, she introduced me and invited the audience to go into a deep meditation and really hold the intention to receive this energy that I was going to bring through the music. When I began to play, I was absolutely amazed at the energy that came in. I almost felt like I was in some kind of a very powerful force field. And when I started to play, I had such a tangible sense that as my fingers were moving and as the notes came through, I mean, I'm hearing the music just before I play it. And there's a part of my left brain, linear, analytical mind, where I'm referencing all of my years of training and knowing the notes and the right chords to play. I'm translating what I'm hearing into the appropriate chords on the keyboard. But it was as if this other presence had taken over my body and was playing it through me. I had such a tangible sense of that, more than I'd ever experienced before. I played for about 10 minutes. When I finished, I couldn't even move for about a minute because I was just so... it was such a profound experience for me. And when I finally was able to stand up out of my chair and I walked over to the side of the stage, there was about 30 people standing in line, half of them with tears in their eyes. They were waiting in line to give me a hug because they were all so moved by this amazing experience. And over the next 9 hours, throughout the rest of the day, I had dozens of people share with me that they had a profound healing experience. Well, I'm convinced that it was because everybody in the room was so totally present and so totally aligned and so totally, there was no distraction. The shared purpose was to allow a greater sense of connection and me and the audience having this moment, or perhaps a half-hour period during the performance. It would be like a very deep meditation that would facilitate some really powerful inner experiences for most of the people in the room. Over many, many years, I've had a lot of feedback from different people sharing with me some of the experiences they've had. So I'm giving it a kind of an overview of the process and how it evolved. I don't analyze it. I've learned not to. In the beginning I did a bit, and I realized that would actually get in the way.
Right.
And I gradually realized that I just had to follow my heart and just have what was really important is having a clear intention to allow that energy, which I really feel is coming from presence. That's my word for the higher self, right. The source, divine source, God. The key was to get out of the way and allow that energy to come through. Right. And to invite the audience to hold the intention to receive that energy and on a conscious level. And I would explain to them, this is coming from source. Right. And it is an expression of the collective higher self of all of us gathered here in this moment. And you are participating, the audience's role in receiving that was equally important to my role in allowing it to come through me. In the beginning, I had a number of theories about the process, and people even sent me various messages they had received from Ascended Master teachings and various spiritual sources. Some of those explanations indicated that the music that I was hearing on the inner was actually coming from higher dimensional states of consciousness at the angelic level, and that perhaps whatever gift I have received in terms of my own soul purpose and my own connection to source spiritually, there is just some link on an inner level where I'm able to, when I hear this music that is so inspiring, it's not coming from me, it's coming from that collective. It's almost like a gestalt of collective consciousness. One channel a number of years ago described that in my soul contract with my art, with my music, and it's not just even in this lifetime, there's a number of other lifetimes as a composer. They went on to describe that many of the great classical composers through the Baroque, the classical, and the Romantic period, they were kind of a soul group that were all they were all able to tap into this gestalt of, it was almost like an oversoul of profound music that was at a very high level of very refined, in incorporating a tremendous level of sacred geometry through harmonics. So many of the great classical composers that I personally was very inspired by when I was growing up and learning piano, Johann Sebastian Bach, Beethoven, all of these great composers were able to somehow download, so to speak, the inspiration, the source of their music was coming from the same sort of collective oversoul. Since 1994, when I first began to spontaneously compose music for groups and meditation, it was actually the very first gathering I ever did in this capacity in Vernon, BC. I had brought my keyboard and I played a 20-minute meditation at the beginning. My partner then brought through a 45-minute talk. We took a break. A woman that had come to the group approached me on the break and said, "I got a message for you." She was a sensitive clairvoyant. And I said, "Okay." She says, "I got very strongly, this music you're bringing through would be a very powerful tool that would help people remember who they really are in terms of their soul, their essence." And I had this energy run through my body. It was like my body saying yes. And so I began, okay, I really felt strongly I was being guided to do this. So I wrote up a brochure. It took me a few days, and it was a bit of a struggle to come up with what I thought were the appropriate words. In the beginning, though, I was scared to, I was a little nervous about using any terms that would be possibly interpreted as spiritual or new agey. So I tried to keep it what I believed most people could accept. And this is why it took me 3 days to write it, because I was really in my head about it. So I put it out there, and at the beginning I called them musical readings. In the first few months, some of the people that came really had a really good experience, but almost as many others came where I often questioned whether they really had it really connected or not. And I would go to a lot of doubt afterward. It seemed like the person didn't really fully experience, or I wasn't even sure if I was really connected during these particular sessions. This went on, like I say, for a few months, and then finally a real breakthrough happened when a woman I had never met before, it was her birthday, two of her friends had purchased the session as a gift for her. It was a birthday gift. And she had never heard my music. She had no preconceived ideas about what would happen. So she came into this session without any expectations. Before I did her music, and she sat with me during the session, in the beginning I did most of these soul portraits in person. Like I said, at that point I was still calling them musical readings, but I changed the name shortly after this experience. Before I began to play the music for this woman's session, I had a very powerful meditation, and I really experienced a much more tangible sense of this energy. When I began to play, it was similar to this experience I described a few minutes ago when I played for the large group. It just felt so clear, and it was almost as if this energy was moving through me playing. I was very much there, and I was very aware of what was happening, but I was able to surrender to another level, I think. That's really what happened. I just allowed this, what I just intuitively sensed and felt was a much higher, much more connected energy to come through during the time I played. When I finished playing, this lady was incredibly moved and very grateful. She must have thanked me about 50 times in the next hour as we talked. And she described visions she had, seeing angels. She was just really, really incredibly grateful. About 3 weeks later, I received a letter from her where she went in further in explaining how powerful the experience had been. And in the letter, she explained that prior to meeting me, she'd been so depressed that she didn't even really want to be alive anymore. And that the music had helped heal that in a big way for her. And that she connected to a sense of purpose and joy that she never knew was possible. Well, I was so moved and grateful to receive that. I too had an equally powerful healing. All those doubts that I'd had and insecurities, it just fell away. Right. because I got very strongly that her experience was really, it just so validated and confirmed that something tangible was happening. I also got that I didn't really need to explain it. Right. And I also knew I had to rewrite the brochure, so I wrote a new brochure, and it took 3 minutes instead of 3 days. And I've pretty much left it unchanged ever since. Because it became very clear to me that this was a great example of what I had read about in the Course in Miracles, that miracles, which is where spirit moves through us to facilitate healing, undoing the errors in perception that we hold in our mind, undoing the error in perception that we're separate from each other or from Source. What is required for a miracle to happen is 2 or more coming together with a shared purpose. And it just became so clear to me that this was in essence, I was using the music as a vehicle to facilitate exactly that. That the shared purpose in this case was creating some music or allowing some music to come through that would assist the person receiving that music in having a more tangible remembrance of their essence that is more felt in the heart instead of it being a concept or a belief in the mind. And inasmuch as this woman had that powerful miracle that helped her remember who she really was from a heart space, I too had the same experience. And it was her feedback that facilitated, so it was a shared experience and it was mutual. I also got to change the name, and it really felt a good name was a soul portrait. It was a piece of music, as almost like a symphonic piece that has almost the same kind of structure, and having my classical background, it's like a musical soul signature as such that is expressing on a vibrational level the energy and essence of that person. It's pretty simple and it just takes a moment. Sometimes I meditate a little bit. In the beginning I used to meditate more, but over the years I came to realize that I just really needed to be really calm and still. And the key was just really holding in the clear intention to receive the music. So when I have been asked to create a soul portrait for a person, mostly I do them long distance. The person doesn't need to physically be with me. I just like to have their name and birthday, and that's just to identify who they are, because I totally give it to their higher self and my higher self. And the less I know about the person, the better. The name and birthday is, like I say, just to identify who they are. And so I just think of the person, I might look at their name and birthday, then I do a silent prayer to my own higher self, all my guides, my angels, to their higher self, all their guides, their angels. And I just request that the music I bring through express the energies that will assist that person and be for the greatest and highest good for them. And then I just get out of the way, and I might do a few deep breaths, and I just know I'll feel it. Now's the time, and then I just hear it. I'll just be guided. Start with this note, and I'll begin to play usually a single note with a string sound, and then it just comes. I'll hear the next note. I'll hear the next note. It's sort of downloaded almost, moment by moment. I don't know what I will play until just a second or two before, and I hear it in my inner hearing. And as I'm playing, I can hear what's coming, and I know what notes to play, and that's where I'm referencing my musical training. But all the knowledge of theory and music and many years of understanding music per se, that aspect of the process is very much in the background. It's more in a role of serving. The main piece is the intuitive feeling space. That's where I'm really being directed from. It's almost like the music is coming to me on that level, and it's almost like I hear it more in my heart, although I experience it in my inner hearing as well.
So these days I know that you've been doing some performances, like some public performances, and going to events, offering your services at events, as well as you have a bunch of CDs. Why don't you tell us what's up for you these days?
I recorded quite a few over the last 20 years. I just came back from the Nelson area, doing a few concerts up there, had a great time. Yeah, for most of the last 12 years I've been traveling a lot. I go to Europe twice a year. And I feel like I'm just sort of guided to go from and I often don't know where I'm going until a few weeks before. Someone asked me recently, who's your agent? And I said, God. I've often used these 3 quotes to sort of describe how my life has unfolded in the last 10 years or so. 3 quotes by Woody Allen, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. John Lennon once said, life is what happens while you're making other plans.
Sure.
And Woody Allen's quote was, 80% of life is showing up. Right? So just show up, drop your plans, and let it be.
Yeah.
That's Paul McCartney's quote from the
Right.
song Let It Be. I really feel strongly that when we learn to trust Spirit, learn to trust our heart's desire as our direct link to God's will, there is a plan, and it does work, as long as I remember to give all the credit to God and trust my heart, and it seems magic happens, doors just open. So it just seems that's where I'm called to be, and so far so good.